program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. Your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Monday, May 4th. And your readers today are
Ed Howard
and Ted Pajacki. And as we start off this day, we wish you a good morning on this iconic Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with all of you as we have a beautiful spring day today. It's going to be breezy today with a blend of sun and clouds with a high of 66. It'll be overcast tonight with a couple of showers and get breezy a little bit late. And it'll all be about 58 tonight. Then tomorrow, it'll be breezy with periods of rain, and then it'll start to get cooler in the afternoon with a high of 64, and then it'll go down to 43 tomorrow. And as I look ahead on the forecast for the rest of the week, I'm seeing showers every single day.
Ooh.
Ed, how's your ark coming along in the backyard? Wow, this has been some springtime.
Yes, it has.
So the normal high and low is normally 63 and 44. The record high was 85 degrees in 1944, and the record low was 29 degrees 100 years ago in 1926. Last year, we had a day of 50 degrees and 44 degrees. And the weather trivia is kind of an interesting question today. 7.8 inches is a world rainfall record for A, 1 minute, B, 15 minutes, or C, 1 hour. And the answer is B, 15 minutes. And that took place at Plum Point, Jamaica on May 12th, 1915. And that's a lot of rain in a short period of time.
I don't know. How is there any room for any air in there? It would seem like it would be, you're underwater almost.
Yeah.
So, well, let's turn now to the front page of today's Buffalo News. And our lead story is headlined, Hochul Lawmakers Considering New Limits for ICE Collaboration in New York as the Budget Agreement Nears. Governor Kathy Hochul and top lawmakers could reach a tentative agreement on the next state budget as soon as this week, including new policies to keep local officers from working as deputized federal immigration agents. A 1996 federal law allows U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officials to reach agreements with state and local enforcement agencies to use those agencies' offices, jails, and officers to carry out ICE's duties. 10 police agencies in New York have such agreements, including the Allegheny Village Police Department and sheriff's offices in Cattaraugus and Niagara counties. Such agreements would be outlawed under the latest proposal under consideration by Hochul, Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie, a Democrat of the Bronx, and Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart Cousins, a Democrat from Yonkers, according to people with knowledge of the negotiations. They said Hochul backed off her previous proposal, which would have allowed officers to share information with ICE if officers had, quote, probable cause, unquote, to believe the person had committed a crime. And they said Hochul backed off a second proposal, which would have prohibited local law enforcement from providing information to federal immigration authorities about victims and witnesses while responding to non-criminal incidents such as traffic stops. Both of those proposals, they said, were rejected by lawmakers. The governor remains focused on working with the legislature to keep federal overreach out of New York, and any changes to the proposal have come as a direct result of requests from the legislature, said Jess D'Amelia, a spokesperson for Hochul. Immigration reform is one of a handful of non-economic policy issues that Hochul, Hastie, and Stewart Cousins have been discussing in the budget, which is due April 1st and remains late. In a meeting with reporters in the state capitol on Friday, Hochul expressed optimism that a budget deal could be reached soon. We've been working really hard to make sure that we have agreement in many of the areas that have been hard before that we're getting closer to, Hochul said. We've come a long way. Asked if a tentative or framework agreement on a state budget could be reached in the next week, Hochul said, for sure, for sure. Hochul, who has described ICE as an out-of-control agency, has repeatedly criticized an ICE officer's deadly shooting of Renee Nicole Good, age 37, on January 7th, as well as the U.S. Customs and Border Protection fatal shooting of Alex Preddy, also age 37, on January 24th. Both incidents were in Minneapolis. More recently, the Buffalo-born Hochul has been citing the death of Nurul Amin Shah Alam, age 56, a mostly blind, non-English-speaking refugee from Myanmar, found lifeless 5 days after Border Patrol picked him up at Erie County Jail on February 19th. They had left him outside a closed Tim Hortons on Niagara Street in jail-issued booties instead of shoes, and his death had been ruled a homicide. Hochul has slammed the actions in March of federal agents who detained 5 workers on the construction crew of the new Buffalo Bills stadium who were in the country legally. They were picked up away from the stadium site. Hochul said President Trump had promised that federal immigrants agents would target, quote, the worst of the worst offenders, but instead are detaining non-offenders. I think it's shameful, Hochul said. These are people that are contributing to doing hard jobs year-round. In January, Hochul proposed the Local Cops Local Crime Act to end agreements between officers, such counties that allow officers to be deputized as ICE officers on civil immigration raids. A similar proposal, the New York for All Act, sponsored by the Assembly member Karen Reyes, a Democrat of the Bronx, and Senator Andrew Gernardis, a Democrat from Brooklyn, would restrict all information sharing between local police and federal immigration agreements. On April 16th, the Erie County Legislature entertained a resolution sponsored by legislator Taisha St. Jean Tard to support New York for All. It did not pass, but it was sent to further discussion for committee, but offered a window into the arguments of Western New Yorkers calling for immigration reform.
Also on today's front page, justice is reversing precedent despite claiming otherwise. As the Supreme Court was barreling toward the final weeks of its term last year, Chief Justice John Roberts made a rare public appearance to defend his colleagues from criticism that they were eager to kick decades-old precedent to the curb. Still bruising from anger on the left over the court's monumental decision 3 years earlier to overturn Roe v. Wade, Roberts rattled off stats underscoring that his court had taken aim at far fewer precedents than any of its modern predecessors, an average of less than 2 overrulings each year. I think people have a misunderstanding about how much the current court is overruling precedent, Roberts said at a Georgetown University Law Center. But just 10 days after he walked off stage, the Supreme Court let stand President Trump's firing of 2 senior labor officials, despite a 1935 precedent known as Humphrey's Executor that for decades has protected the leaders of independent agencies from dismissal by a president without cause. Critics of the Supreme Court's blockbuster decision Wednesday, gutting the key provision of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and voiding a Louisiana congressional map, say the court did the same thing, effectively overturn decades-old precedent while not explicitly saying so. The upshot is that the majority, without any good reason, has overturned Congress's studied determination, along with this court's precedents upholding it, about how to rectify racial inequities in electoral politics, Justice Elena Kagan wrote in a dissent for the 3 liberal justices. The numbers Roberts cited don't account for instances in which the court has pummeled a precedent without explicitly killing it. In just the past few years, the conservative majority has also veered from precedents involving religious freedom. To me, Calais is the largest example of a ruling from the Roberts Court that in the same breath largely neuters a precedent without formally overruling it, said Steve Vladek, a CNN Supreme Court analyst and a professor at Georgetown University Law Center, referring to Wednesday's case by its title, Louisiana versus Calais. Both conservative and liberal justices ostensibly frown on overturning precedent because it can undermine stability in the law and can make the court appear political. In the voting rights case on Wednesday, Justice Samuel Alito, the conservative justice who wrote the court's opinion, vigorously pushed back on Kagan. In its 6-3 ruling, the first merits decision of the year to cleanly divide the conservative and liberal blocs, the court said voters claiming racial discrimination in redistricting must now demonstrate a strong inference that lawmakers intentionally redrew district boundaries to disadvantage minority voters. But just 3 years ago, in a case involving Alabama's congressional map called Allen versus Milligan, the Supreme Court largely rejected that same argument. Contrary to the dissent's assertion, we have not overruled Allen, Alito wrote. Alito said the court in Allen adjudicated the case based on the parties' arguments. The state's argument was essentially that it had drawn a map that resulted in only one majority black district without considering race at all. How could that map be discriminatory, Alabama asked, if lawmakers never considered race? On a 5-4 vote, the court rejected that idea and adhered instead to a 1982 revision of the Voting Rights Act that permitted groups to bring those claims based on discriminatory effects of a redistricting. In other words, it didn't matter whether lawmakers intended to discriminate if the new district effectively deprived black voters of an equal voice in the election. As this court has long recognized, and as all members of this court today agree, the text of Section 2 establishes an effects test, not an intent test, Justice Brett Kavanaugh wrote in concurring opinion in Allen. But in Wednesday's majority opinion, joined by both Kavanaugh and Roberts, Alito said the law applies only when the evidence supports a strong inference that the state intentionally drew its districts to afford minority voters less opportunity because of their race. The court can dramatically rewrite precedents and has, without formally overruling them, Richard Pilates said, a law professor at New York University and an expert on election law. When the Supreme Court's conservative majority in 2022 overturned Roe v. Wade, the 1973 decision that established a constitutional right to abortion, it said so explicitly in the first pages of its opinion. Roe was egregiously wrong from the start, Alito wrote. It was equally clear 2 years later when the court overturned Chevron versus Natural Resources Defense Council, a 1984 decision that empowered federal agencies to interpret vague laws that had become a target for legal conservatives. Chevron, Roberts wrote in that opinion, is overruled. but varying from precedent, sometimes in a way that leaves it alive but on life support, is more common and less clear. Rulings that explicitly overturn a precedent occur in only 4% of the 558 cases studied from 2005 to 2013, in which advocates targeted a prior decision, according to data collected by Lee Epstein, a law professor and political scientist at Washington University in St. Louis.
You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service, and the time is 15 minutes past the hour. Time now to turn to the editorial page. And today's editorial is headlined, Politics as Usual, Rejection of Utility Expert for County Water Authority Board was sadly expected. Albert J. Gilowitz said he has no political affiliations or aspirations, which is precisely why he made a terrible candidate for the Erie County Water Authority Board of Commissioners in March. The Water Authority is widely known for choosing its board based on political affiliations and aspirations. What was Gilowitz thinking when he applied for the job? As he told the News' Sandra Tan, he wanted to give back to the community. But just about everyone knows that becoming one of the Board of Commissioners, which typically meets once a month and pays a yearly stipend of $22,500, requires one simple ingredient: political capital. Oh, and the timing of the application so that the applicant's party is turned to pick. The Water Authority, which regularly doles out high-paying jobs to political donors and loyalists, is that typical patronage pit that many communities, this one included, rail against, but nothing ever seems to change. It doesn't help that state law dictates which political party board commissioners must be registered with before any other qualifications can be considered. Gilowitz, the semi-retired professional with a bachelor's degree in civil engineering and an MBA, is supremely qualified. His credentials include 13 years of experience as the University at Buffalo's Director of Facilities, Sustainability, and Energy Management, in which he addressed severe power outages at the UB South campus during the surprise October 2006 storm. Working with university budget offices, addressing cybersecurity risks, and developing long-term capital construction plans. Then, leaving the university and serving as the Energy and Utilities Director for Purdue University, which serves more than 50,000 students a year. In that role, he told Erie County legislators, he reduced Purdue's energy costs by $6 million a year. Before them, county legislators had a candidate supremely qualified to sit on the Board of Commissioners who could provide important guidance to the Water Authority, which has raised average water bills by 66% since 2020. Gilowitz's experience ranges, as he said, from boots on the ground, digging the ditches and trenches, to high-tech people and engineering staff. It's no wonder he thinks he could be of value to Erie County. Who wouldn't think that? Nonetheless, the county legislature voted 10-1 last month to appoint incumbent Republican Commissioner Peggy A. Legree to a third term. Legislator Jeannie Vinal, a Democrat of Amherst, who said she was impressed by Gilowitz's application, was the lone legislator to vote for Gilowitz. But state rules, not competence, dictate who gets to play this political game. Democrats hold a 2-1 majority on the 3-member Water Authority Board because Democrats control the county legislature. However, it was Republicans' turn to nominate someone, and they chose Legree. Gilowitz, who said he's not involved in local politics, is a registered Democrat. To be fair, Legree is also experienced. She previously served as an associate deputy comptroller, deputy budget director, and first deputy county clerk for Erie County for more than 20 years before being appointed as a Water Authority Commissioner in 2020. She touted her work meeting the challenges of the county's aging water infrastructure, unfunded mandates involving lead pipe replacements, and the authority's 5-year capital improvement plan. Still, The political process that counted out Gilowitz even before he started demands change. One wonders if politics will ever be rinsed out of the Water Authority, or is public interest on a permanent spin cycle when it comes to this Board of Commissioners?
Next, we have another voice column, and today's topic is crime and safety. And it was submitted by Nicole Fan, who was a junior in the State Policy Advocacy Clinic at the Brooks School of Public Policy at Cornell University. And the topic is, New York must act before domestic violence becomes deadly. Two more devastating acts of fatal domestic violence have made headlines. First in Virginia, then in Louisiana. It is always shocking to hear about domestic homicide. What is not surprising, however, is the presence of a firearm. In New York, the presence of a gun increases the risk of domestic homicide more than fivefold. In 2022, firearms were used in 34% of intimate partner homicides statewide. State leadership has recognized this reality. Governor Hochul has strengthened New York's response to gun violence, including recent legislation requiring the temporary seizure of firearms at domestic violence incidents. While this is an important step, a 5-day removal period does not address the volatility that makes firearm-related domestic violence so dangerous. The question then is how New York can protect survivors before these situations become fatal. One practical step is passing the Lethality Assessment Bill. This legislation would require officers to conduct a 13-question assessment at every domestic violence incident to identify individuals at high risk of fatal harm, connecting them to support services such as hotlines and shelters. Lethality assessment has a 92% accuracy rate in identifying high-danger cases. In Maryland, its implementation was associated with a 32% reduction in domestic homicides. A study in Oklahoma found that reports of knife and gun use lowered from 24% to 4% after a lethality assessment intervention. This practice is required by law in 6 other states. The lethality assessment has already been implemented in Dutchess County. Since 2014, the county has seen a 59% reduction in domestic homicides. Yet, the Office of Prevention of Domestic Violence reported that as of 2025, that there is still inconsistent use of lethality assessment across the state. In a context where a firearm could dramatically increase the likelihood of a fatal outcome, earlier identification of risks is critical. New York has acknowledged how firearms can escalate domestic violence. The next step is to protect survivors earlier and more consistently. Implementing the lethality assessment statewide will be a targeted step toward reducing the domestic homicide rate.
Well, next we have our editorial cartoon for the day, and today's cartoon comes from Mike Lukovich, who writes for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and also Creators Syndicate, and he is consistently not a fan of President Trump. Today's cartoon is a one-panel cartoon which is largely taken up by the image of a pig, and the pig is labeled Iran War. And as we look, we see a lot of red around the pig's mouth and the bottom of its snout. And in the upper right-hand corner, there's a jet fighter flying over, and it's dropping what look like bombs, but as you look more closely, the bombs have red tips on, and they are labeled lipstick. And I think what the intent here is, I could be wrong, but I think the intent here is to illustrate that old phrase of putting lipstick on a pig.
Our first opinion piece nationally is from Ronald Brownstein. The headline is, "The Supreme Court Recreates America's Worst Racial Injustices." The Supreme Court's decision further eviscerating the Voting Rights Act will enable a systematic disenfranchisement of minority voters that echoes the darkest moments in America's racial history. With their sweeping ruling, the 6 Republican-appointed Supreme Court justices have empowered GOP-controlled states to erase legislative districts that now elect minority representatives, even as non-white people account for the vast majority or even all of those states' growths, according to an analysis of census data by the Equity Research Institute at the University of Southern California. The decision points to a future in which these states will gain more congressional representation primarily or even solely because of a minority population growth, but then deny those citizens meaningful political representation. It's a striking contradiction, says Manuel Pastor, the executive director of the Institute. It is part of a frightening project of trying to lock in minoritarium, which means white rule. The widening gap between population and representation ominously reprises one of the greatest racial inequities in American history. The notorious 3/5 compromise in the Constitution counted an enslaved black person as 3/5 of a free white person when allocating House seats and Electoral College votes, but denied those slaves the right to vote. It also echoes the long years of Jim Crow segregation, when the states of the former Confederacy gained electoral power from their large black populations, but systematically denied them the ability to vote until the passage of the Voting Rights Act in 1965. The Civil Rights Revolution that included passage of the VRA really was a completion of what began after the Civil War, to create a modern democracy that establishes a citizenship regardless of race or ethnicity, says University of Connecticut historian Manisha Sinha. That's what the opponents of the VRA are fighting against, she adds. It's a very old fight. The ruling may come too late for many states to redistrict before the 2026 election, but analysts see about 10 states that could redraw their maps by 2028 to eliminate minority representation under the permissive new standard established this past week. There are at least a dozen, maybe as many as 20, congressional seats and up to 140 state legislative seats now held across the South by blacks or Latino Democrats that Republicans could target. And even that doesn't encompass the decision's full implications. 2/3 of all the cases brought under the VRA Section 2, the provision the court majority functionally invalidated, concern discrimination in elections for local office. The impact on Congress, in turn, will be magnified after the 2030 census, when many of the southern states likely to disenfranchise minority voters are expected to gain congressional seats. 4 years from now, Texas and Florida are set to gain as many as 7 new seats between them, and Georgia and North Carolina are likely to add representation as well. Since 2010, minorities account for all of Georgia's population growth, and at least 4/5 of the gains in the other 3. We are going to get further and further away from the vision of one person, one vote, pastors said. For Chief Justice John Roberts, the decision represented an opportunity to reverse a stinging defeat he suffered, largely at the hands of other Republicans over 4 decades ago. As a young assistant in the Justice Department under President Ronald Reagan, Roberts led the fight against 1972 amendments to the VRA that reversed a 1980 Supreme Court decision narrowing its scope. In Mobile versus Bolden, the court had ruled that voting practices such as District Max could only be overturned with proof that lawmakers intended to discriminate. When a bipartisan coalition of senators led by Bob Dole, the future GOP state Senate Majority Leader and presidential nominee, moved legislation to restore the previous understanding that VRA prohibited actions had the effect of discriminating, Roberts drafted a flurry of op-ed articles, memos, and congressional testimony opposing it. The Roberts Court, in other words, is seeking to suppress a demographically driven racial reallocation of economic opportunity and political power. The consequences of doing so may be even more explosive than when the court last moved to aggressively undermine the Constitution's guarantee of equal protection for all. You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service, and the time is 31 minutes after the hour.
And our next column comes from Stephanie Tolliver, who writes for The Bulwark, and her headline is, "A Ballroom Will Not Save Our Kids as Gun Violence Continues." When an active shooter threat disrupted the White House Correspondents Association dinner, the president and members of his cabinet were evacuated swiftly. The threat ended with the shooter apprehended and a Truth Social post. Then, President Trump returned to the podium to make the case for his long-sought $400 million White House ballroom meant to prevent criminals from entering. The solution was a bulletproof ballroom. I was an elementary school student when Columbine made school shootings a national emergency. The safe haven of a school became a potential war zone overnight, and the fear that settled into children that year never fully left. But how could it? The Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting happened when I was a new high school teacher, Parkland when I was a doctoral student, Uvalde when my first faculty position, and the shooting at Brown University happened during my 15th year working in education. Gun violence has followed my career from K-12 student to high school teacher to university professor. Nearly 3 decades later, I'm still waiting for the moment that produces gun reform. Instead, I have more thoughts and prayers than ever and no reform. What struck me watching the footage from the dinner wasn't the chaos, but the normalcy. In the videos, I heard the clinks and clanks of waitstaff collecting plates while journalists knelt on the floor. The sound of dinner being cleared became the soundtrack. Attendees drifted toward the floor as if violence was something that happened to other people in other rooms. Those sounds and slow movements told me everything I needed to know. The people in the room had no idea what to do. And I knew that because I've spent years learning exactly what to do in those situations. Active shooter drills are now standard in schools across the country, with approximately 92% of schools drilling students and teachers on lockdown procedures. We learn to lock and barricade classroom doors. We learn to cut the lights and stay still so the shooter believes the room is empty. But right now, even if our leadership openly states that they want safety, their actions prove otherwise. Trump had a microphone, a shaken room, and a country watching. He could have discussed how easily the shooter entered that space and shared how the same ease exists at the doors of our schools. He could have called for policy reform rather than ballroom renovation. He could have praised the bipartisan unity in that room and asked us to unify to end gun violence. That didn't happen this time, but I have to hold on to hope that one day we'll care enough to protect children as much as we protect the spaces where the powerful gather, that will stop building ballrooms and start building policy.
Now we return to the front page, and there's an article under the title of The Business of Sports, and the headline is Incredibly High Demand to See the Sabres Continues. Another playoff round for the Buffalo Sabres, another quick sellout for all four potential home games at the KeyBank Center. And those ticket prices for resale seats that were sky high in Buffalo for the opening round of the Stanley Cup playoffs have remained steep as the next round looms with excitement and it continues to build emotions. Ticket prices on the secondary market start as little under $400 for Wednesday's Game 1 and Friday's Game 2, and escalate from there, with the lowest price for a potential Game 7 in Buffalo spiking to more than $550 as of yesterday. It is an indication that the Sabres fans may be anticipating a long and grueling series against the Montreal Canadiens, which was decided with Game 7 yesterday and Montreal winning. The team's allotted ticket inventory to sell to fans for the second round was gone within 30 minutes for the first 3 home games in Buffalo, and within an hour for that possible Game 7. Similar to the first round, some tickets are going on the secondary market for 5 to 8 times the face value that season ticket holders paid for them. These prices could further escalate if the Sabres will be facing one of the league's most treasured franchises, one of the 6 original ones, Montreal, whose fans travel extremely well to Buffalo for games. We saw an incredibly high demand yet again, the Sabres said in a statement. The day after the Sabres knocked off the Boston Bruins in Game 6 to win the series, tickets for the second round went on sale on Saturday to season ticket holders at 9 a.m. and to the general public at 3 p.m. Those were all quickly bought up. It was a similar process to that of the first round, just a more compressed timeline. There was a very limited number of tickets available for all 4 home games, and by the time the general public got their chance, according to the team, many more interested ticket buyers were there than there was in the inventory, just like the first round. With dynamic pricing, ticket prices spike quickly for the inventory on the secondary market. The Sabres will again have the home ice advantage and can play up to 4 games at the KeyBank Center in the second round. They will open their series on Wednesday and have another game on Friday before hitting the road for Montreal. A potential Game 5 in Buffalo would be May 14th, and if there is a Game 7, that would be on May 18th. Again, there was a major advantage to being a season ticket holder. While those fans paid 50% more per ticket in the second round, their ticket prices were still more reasonable, and they had access to purchase their seats as well as 2 additional seats to any one home playoff game in round 2. For example, a season ticket holder in section 303 paid $68 per seat in the second round after paying $46 in the opening round. In section 112, a season ticket holder is paying $129 per seat in the second round after paying $86 in the opening round. Prices went up significantly for the sale of playoff tickets to the general public, and they get even pricier on the resale market. The average price for a second round ticket sold by the team is $185, which the team said is in line with pricing from last season's second round pricing all across the National Hockey League.
Well, in news from Washington, our headline is Voters are cut from House races thanks to justices and redistricting. The number of competitive House of Representative districts in this fall's midterm election was already near historic lows before the Supreme Court's decision on Wednesday opened the door to even more aggressive efforts to draw district lines for political gain. The court's ruling, which arrived amid what was already an unprecedented national fight over congressional redistricting, may usher in a new era of nakedly partisan gerrymandering that results in still fewer competitive elections, leaving voters with less power than ever, experts said. The lack of competitive races means that control of the House will likely be determined in November's midterm election by fewer than 10% of Americans, with the winners in the vast majority of districts all but assured before a single ballot is cast, a Reuters analysis found. Only 32 of the House's 435 seats are currently considered competitive, according to the analysis. Those districts were rated either toss-ups or leaning towards Democrats or Republicans by three leading independent forecasters, the Cook Political Report, the University of Virginia's Crystal Ball, and Inside Elections. Most other districts are simply out of play. Cook, for example, rates 375 seats, more than 85% of the House, as either solid Republican or solid Democrat, which means its analysts do not expect them to be seriously contested. Another 28 races are likely Republican or Democrat, according to Cook, meaning that they're not competitive at the present, but might become so under new conditions. This year boasts the fewest competitive House races at this stage of the election cycle since at least 2008, according to an archive of prior Cook ratings. Democrats need to gain just 3 seats to win a House majority, giving them the power to block President Trump's legislative agenda and initiate investigations into his administration. The shrinking House battlefield is the result of several factors, including increased political polarization, but the weaponization of congressional redistricting or gerrymandering, which has gone into overdrive since the past year when Trump began pushing Republicans to draw new maps, is a critical element that's only going to accelerate after the Supreme Court's ruling. We're now in a cycle of gerrymandering wars, said Justin Levitt, a professor at Loyola Law School, who maintains the website All About Redistricting. What used to be a Cold War has gotten very hot. The court hollowed out a provision of the Federal Voting Rights Act that had blocked state legislatures from dismantling districts with mostly racial minority voters. Political experts expect Republican-led states to target a dozen or more Democrat-held majority Black and majority Latino seats that previously enjoyed stauncher protections. I think it will get worse before it gets better, Levitt said, and I think there's plenty of room for it to get worse.
And the headline of our next article is No Link Between Food Stamp Work Rules and Employment. A half dozen cars had been in the queue for nearly 4 hours by the time the House of Hope mobile food pantry line began to move. 70 or so more idled behind them by 11:30 a.m. when the food distribution began. The plan was to begin handing out boxes of groceries at 11, but the Facing Hunger food bank truck delivering the food blew a tire en route. No one complained. Perry Hall was among those waiting. His wife, Lily Hall, volunteers with the distribution team. Perry has been dealing with multiple melanoma. The Halls get by with around $1,500 a month from his Social Security benefits, plus assistance from the Federal Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP. But because of her age, Lily, who's 59, recently became subject to a new SNAP work requirement and at risk of losing her benefits. As part of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, all able-bodied adults 64 or younger who don't have dependents and don't work, volunteer, or participate in job training at least 80 hours a month are now restricted to 3 months of benefits every 3 years from SNAP, formerly known as food stamps. Previously, the federal requirement applied to those 54 or younger. The new rule, which went into effect in November, also applies to parents of children 14 or older, and it removed exemptions for veterans, people experiencing homelessness, and young adults who've aged out of foster care. Proponents of work requirements argue that they incentivize people who are work ready to seek and to keep jobs, reducing dependence on government assistance and upholding the dignity of work. Rhonda Ragobe, a health and safety net analyst for the West Virginia Center for Budget and Policy, and her colleagues have studied the effects of SNAP work rules and found that requiring recipients to work does not lower an area's unemployment rate. Previous work requirements were suspended nationwide during the COVID pandemic, and then they were reinstalled in the fall of 2023. The researchers found that the average number of people employed each month went down after the requirement was reimposed. A 2018 federal research project that examined several data sources, including SNAP data from 9 states, found that work requirements have no impact on labor force participation and the number of hours that are worked.
Well, it's been 40 years since the nuclear disaster at Chernobyl, and the next headline is Disaster's Grip Lingers. Pedro Huron says his health has never been the same since he was sent 40 years ago to clear the Chernobyl site in the wake of the world's worst nuclear accident. He was among hundreds of thousands of liquidators brought in to clean up after the explosion at Reactor 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear plant in Ukraine on April 26, 1986. The disaster sent clouds of radioactive material across much of Europe. In its immediate aftermath, 31 plant workers and firefighters died, mostly from acute radiation sickness. Thousands more succumbed to radiation-related illnesses such as cancer, though the death toll and long-term health effects remain subject to an intense debate. At the time, Huron worked for a business that supplied diggers and construction vehicles, which sent him to the Chernobyl exclusion zone in June of 1986. Of the 40 people his company sent, only 5 are alive today. Not a single Chernobyl person is in good health, the 76-year-old said. It's death by 1,000 cuts. Soviet authorities strove to conceal the extent of the Chernobyl disaster, refusing to cancel the May 1st parade in Kyiv, about 60 miles to the south. Ukraine's current government highlighted the Soviet authorities' bungled handling of the accident and attempts to cover up the disaster. Huron said some of his colleagues produced medical certificates to excuse themselves from serving in Chernobyl, but he was willing to help. I realized that, however small my contribution might be, I was doing my bit to help tame this atomic beast. Working 12-hour shifts, he used an excavator to load dry concrete mixed with lead, shipped to the site by river barge onto trucks for transport to the reactor, where it was mixed to build massive a sarcophagus to contain the radiation. The dust was terrible, he recalled. You'd work for half an hour in a respirator, and it would end up looking brown like an onion.
As part of our newspaper reading, we now present the day's death listings. If you need further information on any of these names, please call us at 716-821-5555. Again, 716-821-5555. There are no death notices in the paper today, but there is one obituary of national note, and it's about Roger Sweet, the toy maker who designed the brawny superhero He-Man, has died. He was 91. Mattel, Sweet's longtime employer and the toy company behind the Masters of the Universe characters, confirmed his death on Tuesday. Again, if you need any further information on this, call us at 716-821-5555. Again, 716-821-5555.
Well, now it's time to turn to Georgia Nichols' Royal Stars. And if today is your birthday, happy birthday. You are sensitive, imaginative, kind, and generous. You have a genuine concern for the well-being of others. This is a year of new beginnings, adventures, and major changes. Keep your eyes open for new opportunities. Now, the stars show what kind of a day you're going to have. 5 stars is a dynamic day. 4 stars is a positive day. 3, average. 2, so-so. And 1 star is a difficult day. Unfortunately, we don't have any 1 or 2 star days today.
All right.
Aries, however, has a 4-star day, and today you're bursting with energy to get things done. You are enthusiastic, proactive, and ambitious. Oh, yeah. Tonight, explore and learn. For us Taurians, we are having a 3-star day. We are chatty because Mercury is in our sign, making us eager to share our ideas with others. With the sun also in our sign, we are more confident and enthusiastic. Tonight, we should be checking our finances. For Gemini, it's a 4-star day. This is a marvelous day to enjoy the company of friends. In particular, you'll be successful dealing with groups and organizations because your enthusiasm and drive will catch their attention. Tonight, listen and cooperate. For Cancer, 3 stars. Your ambition is aroused today and you intend to go after what you want. People will step aside as they do for anyone who knows where they're going. Tonight, get organized. For Leo, 4 stars. This is a powerful way to begin your week. The sun at the top of your chart makes you look fabulous in everyone's eyes. Tonight, you should socialize. For Virgo, 3 stars. It's a strong day for you. Check out travel gains or act on your desire to expand your world in some way. But tonight, relax at home. For Libra, 3 stars. It's a tricky day because you might attract someone to you who is very forceful. Meanwhile, you are a people pleaser. Tonight, you're going to have lively conversations. For Scorpio, 3 stars. Today, you begin your week hitting the pavement running. You're gung-ho to get a lot done, which is why not only are you working hard, you're also delegating and allocating as much as possible. But tonight, focus on maintaining your belongings. For Sagittarius, 4 stars. Today, the moon is in your sign, energized by fiery Mars, making this a wonderful day to socialize. And tonight, you're in charge. For Capricorn, 3 stars. Although you're keen to play and pursue pleasure this week, including romance, today you're motivated to make some domestic improvements. Tonight, enjoy peace and quiet. For Aquarius, 4 stars. Put on your dancing shoes and get out there. Your ability to persuade and convince anyone about anything you want is fabulous today. Tonight, be friendly with others. And finally, Pisces is 3 stars. You are very enthusiastic about financial matters today or something to do with earnings and cash flow. Tonight, you are admired.
And now it's time to take a look back in history to see what happened on May 4th. And on May 4th in 1776, Rhode Island declared its independence from England, becoming the first North American colony to do so. In 1865, Abraham Lincoln was buried in Springfield, Illinois. Mourners have paid their respects to his funeral train that traveled through 180 cities and 7 states to reach his hometown. In 1886, a labor rally at Chicago's Haymarket Square, a bomb was thrown at police who were trying to break up the gathering. Police and protesters traded gunfire, and between the explosion and the gunfire, several people were killed and dozens injured. In 1905, the second and successful attempt to build the Panama Canal and connect the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans officially began. In 1961, the first Freedom Riders left Washington, D.C. aboard a Greyhound bus headed south. The 13 riders included a young John Lewis, who later served 33 years as a U.S. representative for Georgia. In 1970, 28 National Guard members fired more than 60 rounds at anti-war protesters on the campus of Kent State University, killing 4 people and wounding 9. And finally, in 1990, the electric chair malfunctioned 3 times during the execution of Jesse Tefero in Florida, after which several states turned to lethal injection as a more humane method.
And now from our political notebook, U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro said on Sunday that the Secret Service agent who was shot at the White House Correspondents Association dinner last weekend was hit by a shotgun blast from the suspect charged with attempting to assassinate President Trump. We can now establish that a pellet that came from the buckshot from the defendant's Mossberg pump-action shotgun was intertwined with the fiber of the vest of the Secret Service officer, Pirro told CNN's Jake Tapper on State of the Union. Pirro's office filed several charges against Cole Thomas Allen following the attack. It is definitely his bullet, she added. A CNN analysis of hotel surveillance video released by Pirro's office last week, coupled with audio taken from inside the ballroom during the shooting, does not definitively conclude whether Allen fired a shot. But the audio analysis does indicate that 6 shots total were fired during the incident, which aligns with initial statements by law enforcement that Allen fired 1 shot while the responding officer fired 5 more. Pirro said that additional surveillance video of the incident will be released. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio is expected to travel to Italy this week to meet with Pope Leo, a Vatican source said on Sunday, as President Trump's attacks against the Catholic pontiff have drawn criticism across the political spectrum. The meeting, the first known in-person encounter between Leo and a U.S. cabinet official in nearly a year, is expected to take place on Thursday, said a senior source familiar with the Pope's plans, who asked not to be named as they were not authorized to speak on the matter.
You are listening to a reading of articles from the Buffalo News for May 4th on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. We'll return for some more readings after this short break. Your readers today are
Ed Howard
and Ted Pajacki.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
Well, after that rousing music, we'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's Buffalo News. Your readers are
Ted Pajacki.
And I'm Ed Howard, and we'll turn now to the city and regional section of the paper. And our first story is headlined, Williamsville Goes Quiet on Proposal to Limit Amplified Music Within the Village, for now. The Williamsville Village Board won't, at least for now, vote on a law limiting when amplified music is allowed in the village. The village board held a public hearing in March on the proposed update to Williamsville noise ordinance. The rule would have changed when bars and restaurants can host amplified musical performances. A group of residents had pushed for the changes, saying the weekly Music on Main performances and other concerts hosted by village businesses are too loud. But the hearing also drew numerous concert supporters who urged the village not to impose restrictions that could make Williamsville less of a destination for music lovers and other visitors. Williamsville Mayor Christine Hunt, at last Monday's village board meeting, said the board would not take action on the proposed rule change anytime soon. The village board did not formally vote to table the proposed rule change. We are at this time not going to vote on that particular local law, Hunt told the audience. We're going to expect the businesses to follow code and be cognizant of noise levels. If that's not done, we will revisit it and we will look at ways to create some kind of, adherence to what we're asking folks to do and be respectful of our residents. James Now, a village resident and managing partner of Rationales, a Williamsville tavern, welcomed the board's decision to set aside the proposed rule change. We would have been disappointed if they had implemented other rules at this time, Now said, a member of the Williamsville Business Association Board of Directors, but we're pleased that at this time we're not having to deal with a new regulation that might restrict Music on Main or any other live music events. Bars and restaurants along Williamsville Main Street corridor offer live music throughout the week inside and outside their buildings depending on the season. The weekly Music on Main concerts draw the biggest crowds. Patrons walk among the venues during sessions running from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., Thursdays from June to August. Some businesses have sought and received permission to begin hosting Thursday evening concerts earlier in the year and end them later in the year as well. The updated ordinance would have banned amplified sound in the village from 4 p.m. Sunday through 4 p.m. Thursday. The rule change would have preserved Music on Main concerts and allowed bars and restaurants to host bands on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday afternoon. It was the subject of a hearing at the March 23rd Village Board meeting. Some speakers argue that even this proposal went too far and sought, for example, longer hours for amplified music on Sundays. They also said live music adds to the village's vibrancy and is part of what attracts people to Williamsville. Critics, however, pushed for further restrictions, including adding maximum decibel levels to the village code, something Hunt has described as all but impossible to enforce. One Williamsville resident had collected dozens of signatures on a petition seeking restrictions on noise levels that, she said, can be uncomfortable for residents with headaches, sensory issues, autism, or families with infants. The board didn't vote on the proposal after the public hearing, but trustees were expected to take up the measure at last Monday's meeting. Instead, Hunt announced the board was not acting on the rule change. We're not moving on it at this time and are relying on restaurants and businesses to be good stewards of the community and mindful of the residents of the village, he said in a text message to the Buffalo News on Saturday. Williamsville trustee Stephen Meyer said the village's move came after officials heard from voices on all sides of the question, though he cautioned it's not a final decision. A lot of input had been given at that point, but there were still lingering questions about different circumstances of how this policy would be applied, especially for nonprofit events versus restaurants and bars and things like that, Meyer said in an interview. And so there were just some unknowns, and I think we didn't want to rush into any decision without getting the full picture.
Also in city and regional news, the Buffalo Police shake up personnel in schools, and advocacy groups are concerned by the new chief's history. The person in charge of the Buffalo Public Schools school resource officers for the past 7 years, Aaron Young, was removed from his position in early April. Already, district officials said the way police officers involve themselves in school-related incidents has seen significant change. Buffalo Police Interim Commissioner Craig Macy on Friday confirmed Young's removal from the position, noting that Buffalo school leaders and school board members led the decision after reviewing the program and consulting with district community members. The feedback was not as positive as we had hoped, Macy said. According to Buffalo Police internal memo on April 2nd, Macy promoted Kenneth A.G. Jr. from captain to the new title of Chief of Youth Safety and Crisis Response, a position that oversees 10 school resource officer positions, known as SRO, School Resource Officer, as well as a small behavioral health team, a group of officers who are trained to respond to mental health crises along with civic clinicians. Advocacy organizations have expressed concern at AG's promotion. New York Civil Liberties Union police misconduct data from 2024 reveal AG has been investigated by Buffalo Police Internal Affairs Division 20 times since it began on the police force in 2008. The 20 investigations were the second most in the department over the period of 1995 to 2023, the NCLU found. Buffalo police records obtained by the Buffalo News show AG has been investigated 21 times in his career. Internal Affairs investigators determined 2 were sustained, while the other 19 were either not sustained, exonerated, or led to a training-related conference with a superior. We already know that cops in school are more than willing to use force against students, and that risk only grows when there's a lengthy history of alleged violence, said Emmanuel Radford, an organizer of the NCLU. School should be a place where students can learn and grow, not fear violence at the hands of a police officer. Police said AG has not been invested since the NCLU report. Macy emphasized almost everything was unfounded and that the veteran officer had been promoted by 3 different police chiefs during his career. The sustained charges against AG include 2 letters of reprimand in 2017 for working a second job that violated department rules, and another for driving an excessive rate of speed while off duty. In 2016, AG was cleared by a grand jury of any criminal responsibility in a 2012 incident in which he shot a drunken driver suspected who was fleeing a traffic stop. The driver ultimately died when he crashed into a pole, and the pole fell and killed a bystander. AG earned $166,667 last year, according to the Open Book. The police shakeup comes at a time when safety and security remain a focus in the Buffalo schools. A 2022 stabbing incident at McKinley High School fueled a change in superintendents, while an attempted kidnapping at School 59 last year and a 2023 stabbing at Riverside Academy were both reviewed by the law firm Rupp Pfilzgraf LLC, which produced this winter a series of safety-focused recommendations for this school district. School resource officers have had recent trouble too. Lance Woods, the man charged with killing his wife while off duty on Valentine's Day, was a school resource officer on Buffalo's force. Buffalo Schools leadership was asked to respond to concerns regarding AG's hiring and whether the district had any involvement in that process. The city of Buffalo is solely responsible for hiring Buffalo police officers, Buffalo School spokesperson Jeffrey Hammond said. The superintendent will collaborate with the new Chief of School Resource Officers on a memorandum of understanding. New school board member Stephen Wright said he has worked closely with Buffalo Police on this fresh start and was pleased with the outcome. Upon taking office in January, Wright said he had been told by teachers, students, and principals that the district's past relations with Buffalo police officers was not always strong and communication was lacking at times. Under the leadership of Interim Commissioner Macy, who has been doing an excellent job, we are seeing a renewed commitment to collaboration, said Wright, who serves on the district's safety committee. I've also had the opportunity to meet with Chief Agee, and it is clear we share the same priority, ensuring the safety and well-being of our state students. District leaders and school board members for the last few years have sought formal clarification of the priorities and responsibilities of school resource officers and their dealings in the district. Buffalo Schools' 60 buildings represent just over half of the schools that fall under Buffalo Police jurisdiction.
Well, the charge for police services at events in the city is going up. The cost for putting on events in Buffalo is about to go up. Mayor Sean Ryan's administration is raising the price on the city's special events fee, which has been flat since 2007, city officials said. The administration is working out the details now. The charge will be for the true cost of any required police presence for traffic and security purposes. And the administration and Common Council are exploring ways to be reimbursed for traffic and security costs for large-scale recurring events such as sporting and theater events for which they are not currently paid anything. Deputy Mayor Benjamin Swanekamp said the city charter requires that the city charge true cost for police services at special events, but has not been billing event organizers for those totals. The council also passed a resolution submitted by the Ryan administration this year clarifying that policy. The city issues about 2,000 special events permits a year, and about 200 of those require some sort of police service, he added. We're working through the details of how do you actually communicate that to a potential event organizer who's looking for police coverage for their event, so we can calculate that ahead of time and so they know what they're actually getting into, Swanekamp said. For organizations operating on a limited budget, the council may waive those fees. Interim Police Commissioner Craig Macy said the department has spent more than $868,000 on overtime alone providing services for events this fiscal year. Because of the city's fiscal crisis, the administration proposed a 25.8% tax levy increase, and the city is looking closely at how to control costs and collect more revenue, he added. I think now, when you start looking at the proposed tax increase and the budgets, there's a lot more attention to the police budget, Macy said. Macy said his department spent more than $27,000 on staffing for a recent Buffalo Sabres playoff game. In the last 4 fiscal years, the department has spent more than $422,000 in overtime costs on Sabres games alone, none of which is reimbursed, according to figures from a police spokesman. With the Sabres in the playoffs and with the party in the plaza and canal-side watch parties requiring more security, those figures are expected to jump this year. Other police agencies are paid for similar services. The subsidiary that runs KeyBank Center pays Erie County, which owns the building, for police services, including SWAT teams and bomb squad teams. Under the 4-year agreement, which expires this season, the county will collect nearly $1.4 million for those services. Organizers of smaller events pay far less than the actual cost to the city for police services, and while the city spends about $114 an hour per officer, all pay and benefit costs, their permit is the same as it was almost 20 years ago, $65 per officer hour. An example, Macy said that the annual 5-kilometer foot race last year cost the city $2,700, but the organizers were billed $812 under the current fee structure. We're looking to work with the council, Macy said. We're looking to also work with community members and create a fair payment plan. Again, we're trying to give people as much notice as possible.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, and the time is 15 minutes after the hour. Now it's time to turn to the sports section. It's good to have those victory articles for us.
Yes, it is.
And our first article here is by Mike Harrington of the Buffalo News, and the headline is Zach Benson was the Sabres' top rat in driving the Bruins over the edge. Zach Benson met reporters inside the Sabres dressing room at KeyBank Center for 7 minutes early on Sunday afternoon. He saw us all standing by his locker when he walked in and let out a devilish grin that stayed on his face throughout most of the interview. Rats generally don't mind talking about their escapades. From my experience in these situations, they actually seem to enjoy it quite a bit. Benson scored the back-breaking goal in Friday's series-clinching win in Boston. Shortly thereafter, he drew the ire of Bruins defenseman Charlie McAvoy, who had a complete meltdown after Benson sent him crashing into the boards. McAvoy chased Benson for a couple of strides, went around a linesman, and went all lumberjack with his stick at the Buffalo forward. Now, McAvoy is facing an in-person hearing with the National Hockey League's Department of Player Safety to go with his upcoming tee times and should be suspended for 6 or more games at the start of next season. Benson? He's prepping for the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs that the Sabres open here on Wednesday night against the Montreal Canadiens. Benson, who will turn 21 when Game 4 is played on March 12th, wasn't pleading innocence on Sunday by any means. But it's clear driving an opponent mad works just fine for him. You obviously don't want to be slashed, but yeah, I don't know. I was just playing to the last whistle, Benson said. You don't want to be slashed, but it happens in the game of hockey and you move on. You move on to the next game. Was it a surprise to see McAvoy lose his mind? I don't really know how to answer that, Benson said. It can happen sometimes. I think he has a hearing, so obviously it's out of my hands, and it's something the league will have to make a decision on. Coach Lindy Ruff had a good chuckle over things, too. Why in the world does the 5'10" Benson drive people so crazy? In hockey terms, Benson goes to the net better than most of the Sabres, and he pointed out line mate Josh Doan aggravates opponents with the way he can pickpocket the puck. I think the biggest thing is he's just on the puck all the time, Ruff said. He's like that insect that just won't go away. You keep swatting at it, you just can't quite get it, and he keeps landing on you. Benny is on the puck as good as anybody on this team, said Doan after Game 6. He's the little dog that everyone's scared of, that for some reason he thinks he's really tough. And we kind of allow him to do that. He hunts the pucks down really well. Boston fans are as aggravated by Benson as it seems McAvoy was. Their contention is Benson slew-footed McAvoy. It's clear by the over-the-top reaction that McAvoy decided that that was the case too. McAvoy revealed on Sunday during the Bruins exit interviews that he was wearing a cast under his glove on his right hand after breaking it during Game 2, so his spill might have caused some searing pain that set him off as well. And maybe he was still annoyed that he and David Pastrnak were toasted by Doan in the puck battle that led to Benson's third period goal. The replay doesn't show a big leg swing by Benson. Think Rasmus Dahlin at the Olympics or McAvoy himself on Tage Thompson in an earlier game in this series. It could have really been just a skate-on-skate tap that we see all the time. Benson didn't get a penalty or any hearings, so the league clearly didn't see an issue. We pause for a second here to offer a quartet of memos to the Bostonians. You spent the last 16 seasons praying to the God of Brad Marchand, albeit a player who's going to get his number put in the TD Garden rafters someday. As scummy as he often was, I'm a big Marchand fan for some reason. He's a winner. But you can't make a figure like him into a hero and then crap about somebody else being the same kind of dirty rat. The weird cries of bloody murder about Benson belie the fact that Nikita Zadorov got a fine and no hearing for his ultra-cheap attempt to break Dahlin's arm after the whistle with a line change in Game 4. No matter if Benson went over the line or not, what he did during the actual play, Zadorov broke his stick over Dahlin's arm. Yeah, third, Bostonians. Nice collapse on the Causeway Street over the back-to-back nights to end the season in the TD Garden neighborhood. The Bruins went 0 for 3 in their series with the Sabres and got sent home Friday, while the Celtics fired blanks in the fourth quarter of Game 7 and lost on Saturday to Philadelphia, blowing a 3-1 series lead for the first time in their storied history. And lastly, Bostonians, in the wake of number 3 above, here's wishing the Chata fans had some fun during the Red Sox season. Oh, wait, that's right. They entered Sunday 13-20, last in the American League East. And they just fired Alex Cora while replacing him with their AAA manager. Enjoy Sweet Carolina, Fenway. Good times never tasted so good.
Well, we'll continue now with Rachel Lindsay's column, and her column is headlined, Sabres Hope to be Fit when the series opens at home versus Montreal. Logan Stanley learned in real time what it takes to manage an illness or an injury during the Stanley Cup playoffs. It was by no means a pleasant experience. The Buffalo Sabres defenseman started feeling the impact of a stomach virus on Wednesday as his team prepared for Game 6 of the first-round series Friday against the Boston Bruins. He didn't skate in practice Thursday in Buffalo, then traveled with the team to Massachusetts, and the illness intensified. It was an awful 48 hours, Stanley said. I was dead to the world. He sequestered himself from the team as it prepared for the series clinching game. He didn't eat solid foods or drink liquids for nearly 2 days and lost 12 pounds from his 6'7", 231-pound frame. Stanley took pregame warm-ups in Game 6 but decided against playing in the series clincher. Yet, by operating out of an abundance of caution last week, he declared himself ready to go for the second round, which begins for the Sabres on Wednesday. It was probably the right decision, Stanley said after practice. I feel better today. It was great to skate with the guys today. Stanley's predicament isn't the only health situation the Sabres manage. Coach Lindy Ruff on Sunday ruled Sam Carrick, left arm, and forward Noah Ostlund, lower body left leg, out of the second round, which thins the roster at center. The Sabres are one of 8 teams that will enter the second round, and it's also likely that wear and tear on the body, anything from bumps and bruises to, as the Boston Bruins revealed this weekend during their locker cleanout, major injuries such as a punctured lung, a torn ligament, or a broken hand keep accumulating. Ruff has a specific strategy on how to manage illnesses and injuries during the playoffs. The key in the playoffs is that if somebody needs extra time, give it to them, Ruff said, whose team lost 20 man games due to injuries in the first round of the playoffs. If there was somebody that needed extra time for today, we would give them an extra day. We just kind of want to stay in every other day kind of routine. Anybody that really needs extra time will automatically get extra time.
Well, so much of our focus is on the Sabres. Let's not forget we have a football team. And here's one about our new coach, Brady, set to exhibit courage as the Bills coach. Joe Brady and Frank Reich sit across from each other on stage, each in their bar height chair, each representing a different team in the AFC East. But on Saturday, they came together for the sake of the crowd, with Reich asking Brady questions about his new job. I was wondering, just for the crowd's sake, could you go into detail on how you might approach the New York Jets? Reich asked. Brady was ready for that question. Well, I hope however I approach it, it ends up like both of them did last year, Brady quipped as the crowd erupted. Last season, the Bills defeated the Jets twice. But plenty's changed since then. Reich, a former Buffalo Bills quarterback, is now on the Jets staff as their offensive coordinator, who was hired in February. Brady, meanwhile, has been promoted from offensive coordinator to head coach of the Bills. Brady's chat with Reich helped kick off the 22nd annual Call to Courage Awards breakfast, an event hosted each spring in Buffalo by Reich. This year's award recipient, selected for his commitment and character on and off the field, was Indianapolis Colts running back Jonathan Taylor. Taylor was unable to attend in person as his wife just delivered a baby, but he zoomed into the event to share how his faith has impacted him. Taylor's testimony was the penultimate part of the program, which was closed out by remarks from Reich. Saturday evening's event began with Reich's interview of Brady, bouncing from questions about the Jets to the draft to filling out a coaching staff. And at-ease Brady spoke for about 10 minutes on how this transition has been, and noting that it's still quite early in the process. Right now, everybody's happy, everybody's smiling, we're working, but it's not always going to be like that, Brady said. And so that's the unknown, that's the challenge, but that's what excites me just as well. While Brady has worked his way up the ranks, this will be his first crack at head coach. He is approaching the job with the determination to stay authentic to the path that got him here. I think the reality of it is that the only way to get experience being a head coach is becoming a head coach, right? Brady said. And so a lot of this, I don't know what to expect, right? So you're just kind of going through it, making sure you're trying to do it your way, the way you think is best for you. Part of Brady's job entailed hiring the rest of the coaching staff. Asked by Reich about the challenges of that, Brady said he found the most important part to be selecting his offensive coordinator, whom he found in Pete Carmichael. Brady acknowledged that this could seem unusual, as most of his interviews for head coaching positions focused on asking him how he would fill out a defensive staff. But Brady, who hired Jim Leonhard as the Bills' new defensive coordinator, wants to spend time in those defensive meeting rooms and is thus placing plenty of trust in Carmichael to maintain the offensive meetings. Some of Brady's staff was on hand at the breakfast on Saturday. I wanted to make sure I put together a staff that not necessarily checked a lot of boxes, but had a lot of different types of personalities, were good for me, and some for my blind spots, Brady said. Brady told Reich he had spent time reaching out to other head coaches, but he balances that with trying to not simply copy what has worked for others. I've tried my best to reach out to a lot of head coaches, guys who have gone through it, Brady said. But if I were to ask you, you've had a lot of different years, and I can't be you. And so, it's one thing to take advice, but it's also, I've got to make sure it aligns with everything that we're doing and understand that no two jobs are the same.
Well, this weekend was the historic Kentucky Derby, and it was historic because with Golden Tempo, DeVoe becomes the first female trainer to win the event. In a chaotic finish where 3 different horses had the lead inside the 8th pole, the Sherry DeVoe-trained Golden Tempo completed a last-to-first voyage to win the 152nd Kentucky Derby on Saturday. It was a historic win for DeVoe, who became the first woman trainer to win the Kentucky Derby. She was the 19th female trainer to start a runner in the Derby. "I don't make my gender my whole identity and purpose in this career," DeVoe said on the backstretch earlier this week. "I do feel it's an honor that I can be in this position that younger women or little girls have someone to look up to. Just because it's not how I feel, it doesn't mean that I don't have a responsibility to acknowledge being a female here does matter." Jose Ortiz won his first Kentucky Derby, edging his brother Irad aboard Renegade by a neck at the wire. He became the 9th rider to sweep the Kentucky Oaks and the Kentucky Derby in the same year. "We always knew this horse had a lot of ability," Ortiz said. "You could see early in its career that we tried things because he's a lazy horse. I knew always that Golden Tempo would be my Derby mount. This is an incredible experience. I just won the Kentucky Derby." It was a chilly, overcast afternoon under the iconic Twin Spires as racing fans watched history as the son of Curlin made up an amazing 18 lengths to win this year's Run for the Roses. The win in America's most famous race was worth $3.1 million, bringing Golden Tempo's career earnings to $3,433,000. The winner is owned by Phipps Stable and the St. Elias Stable.
All right. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, and the time is 31 minutes after the hour. And now, just like Brady, we're going to turn for some advice to Eric. And the headline is, "Sister's personality drastically changed after her divorce." Dear Eric, my sister has become someone I don't know. After her divorce, she became erratic, taking her anger out on everyone around her and making rash decisions we were all forced to resolve for her. Our mother, who always coddled her, insisted on family support for her and put aside any criticism of anything she did. She'd fly off the handle if I wouldn't agree to spy on her ex, or his new fiancée, or to dangerous schemes like faking a heart attack and asking me to care for her kids. She'd make passive-aggressive comments about me to other relatives if I shared any happy news in my life. Yeah, she's the golden child. When I asked her to stop, she'd call me sensitive. I won a major career award and invited my sister to the ceremony. She managed to undermine my confidence hours before the event by commenting about my looks. About 5 years ago, our mother's health began failing, and my sister said she'd go home and check on her. Instead of seeing to my mom's needs and formulating a plan with me to care for her health, she impulsively moved back to our hometown without a job or an apartment. I feel like I'm trapped by her decisions now. Is it possible to set a boundary, or do I just have to let it go? And it's signed, Trapped Sister. And Eric replies, "Dear sister, for your mother's safety and well-being, it's important to set a boundary. When it comes to caregiving, you may find that you'll need to be more stringent, which might cause conflict between you and your sister. This isn't a time for impulsive decision-making, however, and if she's unwilling or unable to be collaborative, she's not putting your mother first. It's okay to say that. As you go through this process, however, you'll want to work hard to separate her feelings about her actions and her change in personality from the task at hand. This is, obviously, easier said than done. There are things between the two of you that you need to resolve, but that task has to be unbraided from the task of caring for your mother. It sounds like your sister is experiencing a crisis that could benefit from therapeutic support. It also sounds like she pushes your buttons. It's fine to tell her that you aren't open to comments or to coach yourself before every interaction, reminding yourself that you won't engage with certain aspects of these interactions that she provides. Our next letter, Dear Eric, I strongly dislike tattoos, as does everyone in my immediate family. I can't fathom why anybody would want to ruin their skin and risk infections. I was hoping this fad would die and fade away like indoor smoking in a restaurant. I can hardly bear to eat out anymore. It's just sickening. The thought of people with tattoos would be cooking, preparing, serving the food, taking out the enjoyment for me. I know it's a personal choice, but why would anyone be proud to show them off like a really ugly piece of art on an ugly or aging body? Beats me. I don't know what to do about this. And it's signed, Ink Free. Eric replies, Dear Ink, I think you know this already, but other people's tattoos have absolutely no impact on your life whatsoever. It seems you're creating a conflict where there needn't be one and robbing yourself of joy. Ask yourself seriously, in what way does a person having, let's say, butterfly tattoo on their shoulder impact the food that you eat? I think you'll be much happier if you remind yourself that you're going to live and let live. In our next letter, Dear Eric, as an occupational therapist, I had to respond to the letter from struggling husband whose wife broke her pelvis. He wrote that he has to carry her up and down stairs to use the bathroom. Can struggling husband set up a first floor bedroom or bring the bathroom upstairs with a commode chair? Many people have turned a living room or office into a temporary bedroom to avoid stairs while healing. It's also possible to use a 3-in-1 commode chair at the bedside for toileting and bed sponge baths for bathing. Ask the doctor for a home OTPT referral as soon as possible. She should qualify for home health. The husband, as the caregiver, needs to take care of himself, make modifications and adaptations to the environment so that he doesn't end up as the next patient. And it's signed, a reader. And he replies, Dear reader, these are great suggestions, and they raise an important point. Making these modifications not only has the potential to improve the wife's quality of life while she recovers, but they also reduce the risk of injury to the husband or risk to both of them should they fall on the stairs.
Well, next we have something that's new and really new, and that is an electric car share service coming to Buffalo's East Side. Getting to doctor's appointments, work, school, and leisure activities may get a little easier for some residents on Buffalo's East Side neighborhoods. That is the hope of Light City Car Share, a new service where members who join can rent electric vehicles by the hour or by the day. The focus of the business is on Buffalo's East Side, where many people face transportation difficulties. 1/3 of East Side households don't have access to a car, said Sinclair McGuffin, Director of External Communications at Light City Car Share. And when you don't have access to a car, it can affect your health, it can affect where you can work, it can even affect your ability to see friends and family. The service will use 3 all-electric vehicles, a Chevrolet Bolt sedan, and 2 Chevy Equinox SUVs, McGuffin said, and they're hoping the program more and more cars can be added. The cars will be parked at the Tri-Main Center on Halbert Street, True Bethel Baptist Church on East Ferry Street, and the Buffalo Center for the Arts and Technology on Sycamore Street. The Tri-Main Center car will be plugged into a special charging station, while others will be plugged directly into outlets at the buildings, McGuffin said. The service opened to customers for business on Thursday. Users must be at least 21 years old, have a valid driver's license, and a valid credit, debit, or prepaid card. The business uses the ZEV app, which must be downloaded onto a smartphone. If approved as a user, customers will be contacted to complete a 15 to 20-minute orientation via video or phone. We will try to work with people as much as possible if they have a derogatory remark on their motor vehicle record, McGuffin said. If we can speak to them and they can explain what happened and we still feel that they're a good candidate, then we'll accept them. Once approved, users can reserve a vehicle in advance on the ZEV app and unlock the vehicle with their phone. The cars can be rented for $5 an hour or $40 a day. If the car is driven more than 150 miles, a charge of 45 cents a mile will be added. The cost also includes insurance and roadside assistance. The car share program is funded through a $10 million grant in 2024 to Clean Mobility Buffalo from the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority to, quote, advance inclusive, equitable mobility and climate solutions, close quote, in the city of Buffalo. The grant also funded an e-bike library and share system and street safety improvements. The 3-car system is only the start for Light City Car Share. While there are plans to expand to more cars, the initiative also hopes to flourish into a full transportation system. Our team is not only committed to providing accessible electric vehicle car sharing, but also identifying local residents to operate a community-controlled transportation system, Brianna Dukes, Light City Car Share's Director of Internal Communications, said in a prepared statement. Additionally, Light City is building pathways to worker ownership and economic prosperity. Light City Car Share will be Buffalo's second car share company. Buffalo Car Share, which originally started in 2009 but was discontinued in 2015 due to insurance issues, restarted its operations in the fall. The all-electric car program currently has 2 Chevy Bolts for rent, and one at the Lexington Co-op on Hurdle Avenue and the other at the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus.
Our next article looks at what's happening in television now, and the headline is Flipping the Script, how Fox's reboot of Fear Factor became a surprise hit. Some of the contestants were covered in liquid concrete. Others carried dead rats in their mouths and were locked in water tanks alongside alligator gars. Fear Factor is back with a vengeance. The show that helped define the reality TV era in the early 2000s staged a surprisingly strong comeback this year with a reboot and a new format. The reboot was the network's top new unscripted series among adults aged 18 to 49 and across all broadcast TV. The show, which also streams on Hulu, delivered 16.5 million viewers across all platforms during its January premiere, and it's already been renewed for a second season. The success was all the more notable because it came during a period when the unscripted TV genre appears to be fading in popularity. The makers of Fear Factor House of Fear point to several reasons, including the popularity of the host, Johnny Knoxville, who's best known for his role in MTV series Jackass and its movie spin-offs, and a new format that sets the series inside a house. House reality is having another moment again, Fox TV president Michael Thorne said, referring to the concept of grouping contestants under one roof for the season. The format of the show being house reality alone doesn't mean it's going to be a success, but when there's a unique format that dramatizes the character arcs and the competitions, you'll see some shows that are really popping up in a big way. The original Fear Factor, hosted by now podcaster Joe Rogan, ran from 2001 to 2006. It arrived at the peak of unscripted television popularity, a period when audiences devoured shows like Survivor and American Idol at their regularly scheduled times on TV. After its initial 6-season run, MTV revived the show in 2017 with rapper Ludacris as its host for a short stint. Since then, the vibe shifted. The reality genre faded from its peak, and streaming erased the idea of appointment TV. So when Fox decided to reboot the legacy series, the network's executives knew changes were needed. To that end, the 10-episode season introduced a new narrative element where all the contestants lived together, creating a bigger spectacle both inside and outside of the fear challenges. People want visceral, exciting storytelling that demands attention. I think Fear Factor does that in a way that stands out from all the other shows in the marketplace, said Thorne, who points out that shows like Squid Game, The Challenge, and The Traitors as other notable series. It's just inherently addictive and therefore bingeable. Strategic marketing like premiering the show after the NFL wildcard game allowed the reboot to build an audience of regular viewers, said Jennifer Hessler, a professor in cinematographic arts at USC. Fear Factor already brings in people who want to see high adrenaline content, but it also allows for the social element where people can build alliances, find romantic relationships, and have the kind of conflicts with fellow contestants, Hessler said. These kinds of more social-oriented reality TV series get people invested in the character relationships in a way that encourages conversations on social media. Fox says it created more than 3,000 Fear Factor social media posts, which drove more than 120 million views and more than 3 million interactions across various platforms. Fear Factor, House of Fear, is just the latest series to capitalize on the popularity of house-based contestant shows. Another hit show that dominated the internet last summer was Love Island USA, which was the most popular reality streaming show for U.S. audiences in 2025, according to Nielsen data. It was among 6 out of the 2025's top 10 reality shows on streaming services that featured contestants living in a house together, like in Million Dollar Street and Beast Games. Rachel Smith, the Executive Vice President of Unscripted Content at NBC Universal, likens the phenomenon to a new virtual stadium sport. You're creating this playscape fantasy that people are really compelled by, Smith said. People at home are watching it for the universal themes of love, betrayal, and friendship. This current boom of house reality mirrors some of the most popular reality shows of the 90s and early 2000s, when the subgenre first found its audience. Tom Noonan, a lecturer at UCL's film school and a former president at TV network UPN, credits MTV's Real World as the pioneer in this kind of TV. If you take Real World and the intimacy and the relationships of it, and then marry that to competition shows, you have a winning formula, Noonan said. He added, it's good old-fashioned showbiz. When they cast a show correctly, or when they come up with juicy enough concept, there's always an audience for those kinds of shows.
Well, back to a few notes on hockey now, and the first is that there will be no Madison Square Garden network coverage for the rest of the Sabres' run in the Stanley Cup playoffs. All games for the rest of the Buffalo Sabres' run in the Stanley Cup playoffs will be network-exclusive television broadcasts, meaning they'll only be on NHL rights holders and not on the Sabres MSG Network local broadcasts. Play-by-play man Dan Dunleavy and analyst Rob Ray will still call the action for all the games on WGR Radio. Television hosts Brian Duff and Marty Baron will host pregame and postgame shows on MSG, as well as the Sabres app and the team's X, Facebook, and YouTube channels. So here's a rundown. Game 1, which will be on Wednesday at 7, will be on TNT, True TV, HBO or HBO Max. Game 2, Friday at 7, will be on TNT, True TV, and HBO Max. Game 3, which will be in Montreal, will be on ESPN. Game 4 will be on ESPN, and probably the series will end that way because the Sabres will take them in 4 straight. But just in case they don't,
I like that.
Game 5 will be back in Buffalo on TNT, True TV, and HBO Max. Game 6 and Saturday will be on either ABC or ESPN, and Game 7 will be on ESPN. Another note here from hockey. Former Sabres coach Ralph Krueger, who was fired during the 2021 COVID-shortened season with the club in the midst of an 18-game winless streak, has revealed that he's been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Krueger, age 66, who's lived in Switzerland since he was fired by the Sabres, told Swiss media outlet CH Media that he was initially diagnosed in the fall of 2024. Krueger went 36, 49, and 12 in his 2 seasons in Buffalo. The disease is incurable, and that's one reason why I've withdrawn even more from the public eye, said Krueger, who also coached the Edmonton Oilers in the lockout-shortened 2013 season and led Team Europe in the 2016 World Cup of Hockey. This is the first time I've spoken about it. It's a big step for me. Krueger said hand tremors and some memory loss were the first symptoms that caused him to seek medical advice and learn of the incurable disease. Krueger was hired by the Sabres in 2019 and fired on March 17, 2021, with the team at 6, 18, and 4, and last in the NHL. He led the Sabres to a 30, 31, and 8 mark in the 2019-2020 season. When the season was stopped, the pandemic left the pandemic with Buffalo 3 points shy of qualifying for the playoff bubble.
And we'll end off today with some short news digests from around the world. First, Trump, wind projects risk national security. President Donald Trump's administration has brought U.S. onshore wind development to a halt, citing national security concerns, the Financial Times reported yesterday. Approvals for about 165 onshore wind projects on private lands are being held up by the Pentagon. The association said the affected projects include wind farms that were awaiting final sign-off, others in the middle of negotiations, and some that typically would not require oversight by the Pentagon, the Times said. And German leader Merz downplays this Trump rift. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said he must accept that President Donald Trump does not share his opinions in order to work with the United States within NATO, but stressed there was no link between their rift and a planned troop withdrawal. Merz dismissed suggestions that his criticisms of U.S. war planning in Iran sparked Washington's Friday announcement that the U.S. would reduce its military presence in Germany, its largest European base, by 5,000 soldiers, and repeated his commitment to the transatlantic alliance. Merz said the U.S. was being embarrassed in talks with Iran. Trump later called Merz an ineffectual leader. And there's briefly, hantavirus, 3 people have died, and 1 case of hantavirus was confirmed among passengers on a cruise vessel sailing in the Atlantic Ocean, the World Health Organization said yesterday. 6 people were affected in the incident, of whom 3 have died, and 1 is in intensive care in South Africa, according to the social media post. In air travel, Spirit Airlines says Sunday it had almost completely refunded passengers and returned its crew to their home bases following its decision to cease operations over the weekend. The carrier had more than 4,000 domestic flights scheduled through May 15th, according to Aviation Analytics. And in Iran, jailed Nobel Peace Prize laureate Narges Mohammadi was in critical condition in a cardiac care unit on Sunday in southwestern Iran, 2 days after she was brought to a hospital from prison, a foundation run by her family said. She was transferred from prison to a hospital on Friday, following a catastrophic deterioration of her health, which the foundation said included 2 episodes of loss of consciousness.
You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Monday, May 4th. We read the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your readers today have been
Ted Pajacki
and Ed Howard. Thank you for listening, and may the 4th be with you.
Go Sabres.
If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring. Radio Reading mails out a large print program schedule to our listeners every other month. If you have not received a Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service large print program schedule in the mail, please call us at 716-821-5555. We will make sure that you receive one every other month. A Braille version of the schedule is also available upon request. Our number again is 716-821-5555. Coming up next on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the New York Times Magazine. And following that at noon is today's USA Today. Stay with us for these readings and more. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability